In a small, dimly lit office on the edge of the city, Brian sat alone, staring at his phone. The clock ticked away, each second stretching longer than the last. It was a Friday evening and the whole world seemed to be winding down, yet he felt trapped in a moment that wouldn't let him go. He had waited for this phone call for days, and now it felt like an eternity. Just a week earlier, Brian had found himself in a whirlwind after a job interview with a prestigious company. The kind that everyone dreams of working for. After he left the building, he thought he'd nailed it. The chairman of the company had been in the room, and he remembered the way their eyes met as he spoke about his experiences. That moment felt so hopeful, yet all he had now was silence. His mind raced back to that day. He entered the office, heart pounding, palms sweaty, and took a deep breath. The chairman, a man in his 50s with a calm demeanor, welcomed him. The room was filled with confidence, and as they talked, the chairman leaned forward, listening intently. Brian felt seen, and that was a rare feeling. But now, as he sat in his empty office, he couldn't help but question everything. Had he said something wrong? Had he come across too eager or too laid back? The uncertainty gnawed at him. As the clock struck 6, Brian sighed deeply, glancing at his phone again. No missed call, no new messages. The silence grew heavy, weighing down on him like a dark cloud. In that moment, it felt more like the latter. He took a sip of cold coffee, bitter and stale. Brian's throat felt dry. Desperately, he went back to his notebook filled with notes from the interview, flipping through pages embellished with doodles and ideas. But the words blurred together, the excitement he once felt fading into doubt. Maybe I should call them, he thought, pacing the small space, but deep down he knew the truth. Calling would only add more pressure. A panicked inquiry wouldn't help his case. Instead, he tried to convince himself of the positives. He had left a good impression, hadn't he? The chairman's smile had been genuine, probably. He often caught himself lost in analysis like this, spiraling when faced with uncertainty. Some people call it overthinking, but for Brian it was a cage made of worry. Yet he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. Time passed agonizingly slowly. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows on the walls. He fought against the urge to check his phone again, instead burying himself in the memories of the week he just had. His friends had tried to uplift him, sharing stories of their own struggles. You never know when a door will open, one had said. But what if the door wasn't opening at all? What if he'd been too hopeful, too naive? The self-doubt twisted like a knife, piercing through his heart. When the phone finally rang, Brian jumped, almost dropping it. His heart raced as he saw the caller ID. The company's name lit up the screen, took a deep breath, steadied his shaking hands, and answered. "Brian, this is Robert Sutherland, the chairman of Crest Industries." His breath hitched in his throat. The chairman himself, this was it. He could barely string words together. "Yes, I have time," he managed to say, clutching the phone tighter. "Great, I wanted to thank you for coming in last week. It was a pleasure to meet you," Robert said. His voice was calm, yet there was a weight to his words. Brian felt an odd mix of relief and tension wash over him. "Thank you, sir. It was great to meet you too," he replied, his heart pounding. Every syllable felt heavy with meaning. "After our discussion, the team and I spent some time reviewing all the candidates, and frankly, you left a lasting impression," Robert continued. Brian could hardly believe what he was hearing. Every worry, every sleepless night began to unravel. Robert's tone softened. "Let's not beat around the bush." For a moment, time froze. The world around him blurred out. He had imagined this moment countless times, but it still felt surreal. He said, unable to hide the disbelief in his voice. "Absolutely, we believe you'll do great things here," Robert replied. Emotions surged through Brian: joy, relief, and a touch of disbelief. This was what he had worked for, what he had sacrificed sleep and sanity for. I accept," he exclaimed, feeling a rush of warmth. Robert chuckled lightly. "Glad to hear it. Let's set up a time to meet next week and go over the details." "I can't wait," Brian replied, his heart soaring. After days of silence, he felt alive again. As they ended the call, he sat back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. It felt like a weight had lifted. All that worry, all that waiting had not been in vain. Hope had blossomed into reality. He laughed lightly to himself, thinking back to his earlier fears, the intense anxiety that had almost consumed him. In that moment, he recognized a truth. Waiting in silence could indeed be daunting, but sometimes what lay at the end of that wait was a life-changing opportunity. With the sunlight fading outside, he realized that he was no longer in that dark, lonely place. Instead, the future shone bright. Brian had faced uncertainty and emerged victorious. He had made space for hope during those quiet moments, and it had led him to this beautiful new chapter. As he packed up his things, he knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but now it felt filled with promise. The call from the chairman was more than just news of a job. It was a reminder of resilience, of how endurance can sometimes lead to the most unexpected surprises. In the weeks that followed, Brian stepped into his new world with confidence. The office buzzed with energy. He found himself surrounded by passionate individuals who challenged him and nurtured his ideas. It was everything he had imagined and more. The worries that once consumed him were replaced with excitement and a drive to create. But even amidst this whirlwind of change, Brian remembered that silence he experienced before that pivotal call. It taught him the value of patience and the strength found in stillness. Life has its rhythms. Sometimes it was a loud crescendo, and other times it was a soft, quiet hum. Both held their own importance. He found himself mentoring new hires, sharing with them the story of that silent wait, the powerful call, and the beauty of anticipation. His experiences became a beacon of hope for others who sat in their offices, staring at their phones late at night, waiting for their own moments to unfold. Life had a way of surprising him. He learned to embrace both the silence and the noise, for each played a part in guiding him toward an unexpected and beautiful future. And with each passing day, he was ready to savor every moment of it. The bright screen illuminated his face like a lighthouse in a stormy sea, but there was no message, no missed calls, just silence that wrapped around him like a thick fog. David stared at his phone, convinced that it was lying to him. Was he really waiting for a call from the chairman himself? The simple thought sent a shiver down his spine. Just a few days ago, David had walked into a luxurious office filled with polished wood and glass. It had been an ordinary day for the world, but for him it felt monumental. Before him sat Mr. Langston, the revered chairman of PowerTech Industries, the most influential figure in the field of renewable energy. That day he had been dressed in a tailored navy suit, his presence commanding yet inviting. David had felt like a small fish in an ocean, but still he held on to hope. He could still hear the calm, steady voice of the chairman. It was a question that had left him momentarily tongue-tied, but in that moment clarity struck. He poured out his thoughts, passionately discussing ideas that could revolutionize the industry. He felt the chairman's eyes on him, sharp and expectant, urging him to continue. "That's the kind of innovation we need," Mr. Langston had said, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. It had sent a thrill through him. Days passed, but all he felt was suspense thick enough to taste. Silence became a heavy companion as he navigated the space between hope and despair. Sitting alone in his small, cluttered apartment, the enormity of the potential opportunity consumed him. He was drowning in a sea of thoughts. What if he hadn't impressed the chairman? Had he been too ambitious? Each thought sliced through him like a knife. To make matters worse, his phone lay flat on the table, like a soldier refusing to march. He felt helpless. But in that silence, doubt crept in like a thief in the night. Clarity turned to chaos in the swirling void of waiting. His childhood echoed in the back of his mind. He remembered how he and his friends would stay quiet in the woods, listening for the rush of a deer or the rustle of leaves. Silent space was sacred then. They would take deep breaths, waiting for the world to unveil its secrets. Yet as an adult, that silence felt suffocating, imprisoning him with questions that had no answers. As day bled into night, David sat on his couch, the muted glow of the streetlights casting shadows on his walls. Fear crept in with every tick of the clock. That day at PowerTech really meant anything. Or was he just another applicant lost in the business churn? Facing uncertainty was a familiar struggle, but this was different. This was a dream vivid, shimmering, yet just out of reach. The hours slipped by like grains of sand, each one falling through the hourglass louder than the last. David scribbled notes in his journal, doodling plans and dreams, desperate to fill the void that silence had created. He crafted a list of what he would say if he got the call. But with no call, it all felt futile, like casting a net into a hollow sea. He closed his eyes, imagining what it would feel like to hear that voice again. Would Mr. Langston say he got the job? Would he congratulate him? He played the moment over and over in his mind. His heart raced at the idea, but with each passing moment the scene shattered. Reality took its place, heavy and unforgiving. He remembered reading somewhere about the psychology of waiting. Studies showed that when people await important news, it often heightens their anxiety. They start to create narratives, little stories around the silence. He found himself doing just that, constructing scenarios that ranged from triumphant celebrations to devastating rejection. Suddenly, the phone broke the stillness, vibrating like a drum in his hands. His heart leaped, then he checked, a text from his brother. "Thought of you today," David sighed, sweet but empty. He scrolled through his contacts, half-heartedly thinking about calling someone, anyone, but the thought of sharing his worries felt too heavy. He let the phone slip from his fingers and lost himself in the darkness of the room. Hours dragged on. Just when he thought he'd lost all hope, a gasp escaped his lips. What if he texted the chairman directly? It felt like a wild idea, but in a desperate moment, wouldn't that show initiative? Then came a voice in his mind, sharper than before. "No, don't do that." He shook his head, feeling the inner conflict churn like a storm. So there he sat, back on the couch, drifting between dreams and despair. Then out of nowhere, a sharp ring pierced through the stillness, cutting deep into his thoughts. David's stomach tightened. Was this finally it? He could barely breathe as he reached for the phone, each ring echoing like thunder in his chest. He blinked at the caller ID and his heart stopped. PowerTech Industries. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He answered, hoping the quiver in his voice wouldn't betray him. On the other end, the soft and composed voice of Mr. Langston came through, strong and confident. "David, thank you for taking my call." Time seemed suspended. "Yes, of course, sir," he stammered, trying to steady his racing heart. "I want to talk about your interview, mister." In that moment, everything else faded away. The doubts, the fears, the long, silent wait dissolved into the background like distant thunder. Yes, sir, I would love to discuss it, David replied, a hint of enthusiasm creeping into his tone. I have to be frank, Mr. Langston said. After reviewing your ideas and passion, I felt a strong connection to your vision. I believe you have what it takes to help us move forward in ways we hadn't anticipated. His heart surged like a wave crashing against the shore. Really, I can't believe it. This isn't just about filling a role, Mr. Langston continued. It's about vision and innovation. David could hardly process the weight of those words. This means so much to me, he managed to say. A warmth washed over him, wrapping around his heart like a comforting blanket after a storm. I'd like to arrange a meeting next week to go over the details, Mr. Langston said. Yes, definitely, I can't wait, David replied, feeling that bubbling excitement once again. As the call wrapped up, he sat there for a moment, the phone still pressed against his ear. The reality of it washed over him like a tidal wave. The silence he had waited through had transformed into a promise, the one he had held onto throughout those long, uncertain days. Hours later, still in disbelief, David reflected on his week. The call had not just changed everything, it solidified his strength and endurance. He had learned that waiting is both a burden and a gift. In that quiet space, he had been pushed to examine his motivations, his passions, and ultimately his resilience. Days turned into weeks as he began to immerse himself in his new role. Each day at PowerTech brought new challenges and triumphs. The energy in the office was electric, filled with the buzz of people who shared a common goal to make the world a greener place. He found his voice alongside others, contributing ideas that not only inspired him but the whole team. Every moment spent there felt like the culmination of that wait. That painful silence had birthed a new beginning. Each time he temporarily closed his eyes in the midst of meetings, he could still feel that passionate intensity he'd felt while speaking with Mr. Langston. The chairman had trusted his instincts, and in turn, it had opened doors he hadn't imagined. As David now walked the bustling corridors filled with laughter and creative energy, he reflected on that pivotal call. The silence had not been an enemy, it had forged him into someone capable of great things. He learned the art of endurance and the beauty of patience in a world that often demanded instant gratification. Sometimes it takes a moment of stillness to prepare us for the wave that's about to come. While waiting wasn't easy, it had taught him valuable lessons. He understood that in the end, it was not just about receiving the call. It was about recognizing the worth of his own voice amid the stillness. And that realization was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. The phone sat there taunting him like a ticking time bomb waiting for detonation. It had been 4 long days since David had stepped out of the polished glass building of PowerTech Industries, his mind racing with excitement and anxiety. He'd had an interview with the chairman himself, a man whose name echoed through the halls of business like a clarion call, Mr. Langston. David had left that meeting feeling on top of the world. The chairman had seemed genuinely interested, leaning forward, engaged as David shared his vision for renewable energy. But now all he was left with was silence. Sitting in his cramped apartment, David's heart raced as he stared at the screen, willing it to light up. His thoughts spiraled in endless loops, moments from the interview replayed like a movie. What if I messed up? Doubt clawed at him like a feral animal, making it hard to focus on anything else. He remembered the muffled sounds of that day, the air thick with potential and possibility. David couldn't shake the image of Mr. Langston sitting across from him, his eyes like piercing green stones assessing every word David spoke. You have ideas that could change this industry, the chairman had said, a spark of approval lighting up his expression. Those words had felt like a lifeline pulling David from a sea of uncertainty. But here he was now in the silence of his dimly lit room, trapped in a loop of self-doubt. Maybe I was too ambitious, he muttered to himself, feeling smaller than he had ever felt. He was a dreamer in an unforgiving world, a world that rewarded certainty and pushed aside the brave-hearted. Every time the clock ticked, it resonated like a drum, each second more agonizing than the last. He glanced at the piles of application rejections scattered across his coffee table, a testimony to months of hard work met with indifference. Frustration boiled within him. Why was he waiting? Waiting felt like a prison sentence, the air heavy almost to the point of suffocating. He recalled a psychology article he had read about waiting and its effects on the mind. It mentioned how silence could amplify anxiety, how the human brain craved resolution. With that thought, anxiety coursed through him, gnawing at his stomach like an insatiable beast. He moved to the window, peering out at the bustling city below. Cars honked and pedestrians rushed by, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside him. Just one call, he pleaded silently. The hope that bloomed in his chest was fragile, like a thin glass ornament, and he feared it might shatter at any moment. Days turned into a blur of anticipation and dread. He avoided checking social media, knowing it would only deepen his sense of isolation. Other friends were moving forward, landing jobs, posting their successes. Each time he saw a notification, it hit him like a punch to the gut, reminders of the world carrying on while he felt like he was stuck in this limbo. Night fell once more, the shadows creeping into his room, stretching across the floor like dark fingers. He settled onto his worn-out couch, running a hand through his tousled hair. The familiar silence returned, draping over him like a heavy blanket. He picked up his phone again, scrolling idly through old emails and messages, but nothing had changed. He still waited. Then on the fourth evening at precisely 7:00 p.m., the stillness was shattered. His phone buzzed like a startled bird, vibrating violently against the coffee table. David jolted, his heart hammering in his chest. He grabbed it quickly, barely able to look. The screen read PowerTech Industries. His breath hitched as anticipation swirled within him. This was it. The moment he had dreamed about since that fateful interview. He took a deep, stabilizing breath and answered, his voice a trembling whisper. The familiar voice of Mr. Langston came through, even more powerful than David remembered. "I hope you're doing well." "Of course, sir," David replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. There was a pause, a moment that felt like forever, before the chairman spoke again. "I wanted to reach out to you personally. First, thank you for the time you spent with us the other day." David's heart soared and he felt a rush of heat in his cheeks. "Thank you, sir." The words hit him like a wave crashing against a shoreline, at first overwhelming but then exhilarating. A flood of emotions washed over him, relief, joy, disbelief. He could hardly find his voice. He blurted out, his excitement spilling over. "Absolutely," Mr. Langston assured him, his tone steady and warm. For a moment, time felt suspended. Everything he had worked for, every sleepless night and every ounce of worry melted away in an instant. He exclaimed, his heart fluttering with gratitude. "We see potential in you, David. You have a vision that aligns with our goals," Mr. Langston continued. "Yes, absolutely." David's voice trembled, mixed with joy and disbelief. He hung up, the reality that had felt so distant finally settling over him like a warm blanket. It was a turning point, the culmination of all his fears and hopes. As he sat back on the couch, savoring the sweetness of that moment, the silence that had once shrouded him now felt different. It was no longer a suffocating force. It had transformed into a quiet space that had allowed hope to flourish, even in the face of doubt. Days turned into weeks, and as he settled into his new role at PowerTech, the anticipation gave way to excitement. He found himself immersed in projects, brainstorming with brilliant minds who shared his passion for innovation. There were challenges, of course, moments when he doubted himself again. But David had learned to embrace that feeling, to recognize it as a sign of growth. He drew strength from the waiting he had endured, knowing now that silence could hold vast possibilities if he just dared to listen. One day in the conference room, sitting around a glossy table filled with eager faces, David presented an initiative on renewable energy storage. He could feel the electricity in the room, and the sheer potential of the ideas sparked discussions that blossomed into plans. Afterward, Mr. Langston approached him, nodding. "That was impressive, David." Hearing those words, he was reminded of everything he had gone through, the agonizing wait, the quiet moments of doubt, and ultimately the triumph of resilience. It didn't take long before he was mentoring new hires, sharing his journey of waiting, hoping, and finally succeeding. "Don't underestimate the power of silence," he would say. As the months passed, the shadows of doubt dissipated, replaced by confidence and purpose. He understood now that the waiting periods weren't just empty moments, they were opportunities for reflection, for shaping dreams, and for crafting ambitions. He recalled the psychological principle of delayed gratification, the idea that by waiting and working hard, one could achieve greater rewards in the end. As he stood at the edge of the future, watching PowerTech grow and evolve, David realized just how true that was. Each day he stepped into the office, filled with the promise of challenge and opportunity. He understood that his journey was only beginning. The silence that once seemed suffocating had birthed a life-changing connection he hadn't dared to dream of. In embracing the wait, he had found not just a job, but a calling. In that moment, he knew he would continue to chase dreams, even when the path would require patience. Because sometimes the most profound things come not from constant noise and seeking, but from stillness and the quiet bravery to wait. The room was silent, save for the ticking clock on the wall, each tick echoing like a drumbeat in David's anxious heart. He was sitting in his tiny apartment, staring at his phone, waiting for a call that may never come. 4 days had passed since his interview with the chairman of PowerTech Industries, a moment that had felt like a breakthrough but now seemed more like a cruel joke. In that luxurious conference room, time had felt suspended. As David had presented his vision for the future of renewable energy, he had felt that rare connection, the kind that ignites passion and fuels ambition. Mr. Langston, the chairman, had leaned forward in his chair, eyes sparkling with interest. "Those are some bold ideas, David," he had said. It had felt like a dream, but dreams can turn into nightmares when the phone doesn't ring. David ran a hand through his hair, fighting the spiraling thoughts in his mind. What if he'd said too much? What if he hadn't said enough? Doubt crawled in, whispering lies that tangled with his hopes. But soon had turned into an eternity. He picked up the faded coffee cup beside him, the taste bitter and cold. It mirrored his anxiety, each sip reminding him of how long he had been waiting. A sharp ping startled him, and for a brief moment his heart leapt. He glanced at his phone, but it was just another social media notification. "You're not good enough," the negative voice in his head sneered. David's family had always cheered him on, fostering his belief that success was just around the corner. But in moments like this, those words felt hollow. His father's smile, his mother's encouragement, all faded like a distant memory when faced with the harsh reality of silence. He could hear the laughter and chatter of his neighbors outside, living lives filled with purpose and connection. It felt like a universe away. He always believed in the power of perseverance. After college, he'd sent countless applications, knocking on the doors of opportunity. Some had opened a crack, but none had swung wide. This was supposed to be different. He had felt it, sensed it deep within him. He opened his laptop, fleetingly browsing job postings, but none sparked that familiar excitement like his time at PowerTech. He leaned back, gazing at the ceiling, lost in thought. What was it about this company? Was it the promise of innovation? The chance to be part of something bigger than himself? Yes, all of that, but also the fleeting connection he had felt with Mr. Langston. The chairman had seemed genuine, eager for fresh ideas. Another glance at the clock, ticking away the minutes. The day slipped away like sand through his fingers. Was he being too impatient? Had he really impressed the chairman, or was that just a figment of his imagination? Moments like these often felt like that delicate balance between hope and despair. How true it seemed now. Life had spiraled for him before. He had faced struggles, but everything had led him to this very moment. Yet here he was, paralyzed by the uncertainty of waiting. Desperate to distract himself, he turned back to his journal, flipping through pages filled with ideas and sketches. It was chaotic, but it felt good to let his thoughts spill out. Maybe if he put pen to paper, it'd release some of the tension coiling inside him. He jotted down the risks and rewards in pursuing his vision, carefully outlining the potential impacts renewables could have on the world. But the quiet of the room was deafening. In that stillness, doubt crept back in, suffocating his creativity. The silence of inaction became eerily oppressive, like a heavy fog that blurred his aspirations. How many hours would he spend waiting before action transformed into outcome? With a sudden spark of defiance, David stood up and paced the floor. He declared to the empty room, a hint of frustration breaking through. What would his father say? Yes, that's what he'd do. He picked up his phone, feeling the weight of it in his hand, almost daring it to ring. That night, sleep would not find him. Memories of the interview danced before his eyes like a flickering film reel. The nervous excitement as he walked into the building, the scent of fresh coffee wafting in the air, and the polished smiles of the staff who greeted him. Seconds turned into minutes, and before long, David realized he was convinced of one thing. The longer he waited, the more it began to consume him. Days passed, his phone remaining silent. The ticking clock was like a relentless pulse pounding in his ears. He found himself missing the sounds of life around him, the laughter of friends, the quick banter of coworkers. The more he overanalyzed the call that hadn't come, the more of his spirit dimmed. He felt like a ship anchored in stormy seas, hoping for the slightest breeze to guide him home. David tried all sorts of distractions. He hit the gym, ran around the park, even called old friends anything to break that cycle of despair. But sinking deeper into silence was like stepping into a dark pool with no bottom. No matter how much he moved, he couldn't escape it. Each night he would fall into bed, staring at the ceiling, willing it to light up with a call. It was one of those quiet nights, the kind where everything conspired to drown out hope, that David found himself at a crossroads. He imagined himself standing before a door, one that could either lead to a bright future or remain firmly shut. But which one would it be? The uncertainty hung thick in the air, and decision loomed over him like a shadow. On the weekend, he found solace in visiting his parents. Sitting across from them at the dinner table, they probed him for news, their faces reflecting a deep love and concern. "You've always been special, David. You'll find your way," his mother assured him, her voice soft yet confident. "Yeah, but it's hard," he finally confessed, feeling frustrated, tears well up. "I thought I had this in the bag." It came tumbling out, every ounce of frustration and pain. "We've all waited for things before." "It's just a part of life," his father replied, a gentle smile resting on his lips. "You have the skills, and those will shine through in time." As he drove home that night, David wrestled with those words. Be patient, they had said, but how long should he really wait? Each day that passed felt like a chapter closing, leaving others to write their own stories while his remained unwritten. When he walked through the door, he felt a new resolve growing within him. It was surreal how clarity sometimes emerged from chaos. Maybe this wait needed to be an exploration rather than an imprisonment. Instead of just waiting for the phone call, what if he prepped for the opportunity he was sure would come? That night, he pulled out his laptop and went to work. He studied PowerTech's projects, researched the latest trends in renewable energy, and connected with professionals on LinkedIn. He revamped his portfolio, adding a section dedicated to his vision for the company. This wasn't just about getting a job, it was about making sure when that call came, he was ready to accept it. Finally, the dawn of the 5th day broke with a warm burst of light filtering through his curtains. It felt symbolic. Today would be the day. He felt a strange energy coursing through him, bubbling with both hope and nervousness. The clock ticked, but instead of watching every second drain away, he focused on his work. The buzz of anticipation snapped him into action. Moments passed like fireflies dancing in the evening twilight. He found his mind racing with ideas, everything starting to fall into place. The weight of waiting began to lift, replaced with the exhilaration of creating, of preparing for whatever lay ahead. At precisely 3:00 p.m., he leaned back in his chair, satisfied with his newfound direction. Inspiration pulsed through him like music, and he closed his eyes, letting his thoughts wander. Suddenly, a loud buzz shattered his reverie. His phone lit up PowerTech Industries. His heart nearly stopped. He felt dizzy, a mix of disbelief and anticipation surging through him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the desk, and answered. "David, this is Mr." There was warmth in his voice, a measured excitement that made David's heart race. "No, not at all." David's voice trembled slightly but was firm. "I wanted to follow up after our interview." A blankness surrounded David as the reality hit him. The waiting had finally led to something real. He managed to say, emotion bubbling just below the surface. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with plans, ideas, expectations, and dreams. Each word hung between them like a bridge, connecting David to the future he once thought elusive. As he hung up, the weight of anxiety that had clung to his shoulders for so long melted away. What once felt like prison bars now transformed into stepping stones. He had embraced the silence in the waiting room of life, learned to find himself within that quiet, and had emerged stronger and ready for whatever lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, David stepped into his new role with enthusiasm. Every project felt alive with possibilities, and with each day, he felt more like the person he had always dreamt of being. He often thought back to those long, silent nights of waiting, recognizing how they had shaped him. He had learned not just patience, but also the importance of preparation, the essence of turning silence into opportunity. In the end, it wasn't just about receiving a call, it was about the journey he had embarked upon while waiting for it. David learned that within silence lies power, the kind that can stir dreams into reality. And as he navigated his new life, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. The phone rang, slicing through the silence of the dimly lit room, its sound sharp and urgent. It was a call he had been waiting for, yearning for almost too long. As David stared at the screen, his heart raced. Was this it? Would it be the voice of Mr. Langston, the chairman of PowerTech Industries, the company of his dreams, the man who held his future in his hands? Just 3 days prior, David sat in that glossy conference room in the heart of the city, breathing in the scent of fresh coffee and polished wood. The room was alive with possibilities, filled with intelligent conversations and eager hopes. There in front of him sat Mr. Langston, a man whose reputation preceded him like a thunderous wave before a storm. David had felt a strange mix of excitement and intimidation, but through it all, he spoke passionately about his vision for renewable energy. "I believe we're on the precipice of something monumental," he had said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind inside him. Mr. Langston had nodded, leaning closer, his gaze intense. "That's the kind of innovation we need," he had replied, sparking fireworks of hope and confidence within David. But now those memories felt like a mirage, fading in the harsh light of day-to-day reality. Sitting on his worn-out sofa, David grabbed the phone, his fingers trembling. The seconds stretched out like an eternity as he debated whether to answer. What if it was another rejection? What if it was someone else entirely? He swallowed hard, reminded of the waiting he had endured in the months leading up to the interview, the countless applications sent out, the long nights spent in doubt. That cycle of anxiety gnawed at him, but he couldn't let it dictate this moment. He felt the weight of that single word, hoping to find reassurance in the voice on the other end. But instead, a hollow silence greeted him. Was this just another disappointment? "Hello, David, this is Mr." The voice cut through his spiraling thoughts like a compass finding true north. His heart raced, and suddenly the world around him narrowed until all that mattered was this moment. "Sir," David stammered, his anxiety moments before forgot. "I wanted to talk to you personally about your interview. I won't keep you in suspense," Mr. Langston continued, his tone measured yet warm. Time froze, David's mind raced. The weight of those words sank in slowly, like a stone cast into a pond, each ripple emanating further until it transformed the landscape of his life. He finally managed to say, "Absolutely." Joy surged through him, a blazing fire igniting deep in his core. "Yes," his eyes widened as he scrambled to keep the rest of the conversation professional. "I'm looking forward to discussing the details," he said, words tumbling out of him in a rush. As they finalized practicalities, the start date, the salary he would be earning, how many vacation days he would have, David couldn't help but marvel at how drastically his life had changed in the span of just a few minutes. The phone call that had once felt like a distant fantasy was now his reality. Each detail illuminated the path he had dreamed of stepping onto. After he hung up, David slumped back into the couch, laughter bubbling out of him. He could hardly believe the magnitude of what had just happened. Those months spent questioning whether he was good enough, whether he belonged in the competitive world of tech and innovation, all dissipated like clouds drifting away from a brightening sky. Perhaps more importantly, he recognized that waiting had been a vital part of his journey. The reality of life didn't just come from the ringing phone or the confirmation of a position. It stemmed from the anticipation, the preparation, and the brutal honesty of confronting the silence that filled the gaps. He remembered reading a book about resilience once. The author spoke about how our inner strength shines brightest during moments of uncertainty. This was a moment fraught with weights and doubts, yet David had navigated through it, channeling that waiting into actionable steps. It had prepared him for the very moment he just experienced. But what about those nights spent tossing and turning, trapped in that cloud of negativity? It wasn't easy, but through persistence and belief, he had turned the tide. The following weeks flowed like a river now, daily meetings filled with energy, excitement, and the allure of new challenges. David felt reborn, stepping into a world alive with opportunities. At first, his heart raced with trepidation as he joined brainstorming sessions with seasoned professionals, but each interaction was a gift. He felt the power of collaboration, gleaming with promise and energy pulsing through every project. Through it all, Mr. Langston would often check in on him, offering guidance and encouragement. There was a moment when the team met to discuss an innovative approach to a new project. "David, I'd like you to present your ideas," the chairman said, and David felt a cascade of exhilaration mixed with nerves wash over him. The eyes in the room turned to him, anticipation dancing in the air. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and shared his vision. As he spoke, he noticed Mr. Langston nodding. Each idea fell from his lips, confident and clear. In that moment, he felt like he was more than just an employee, he was a contributor, a vital piece of the larger picture. When he finished, there was an explosion of applause. Mr. Langston stood up, his face alight with enthusiasm. "That was brilliant, David." There it was again, the recognition he had longed for, the affirmation that pushed him to dream bigger. Later that week, David took a quiet moment to reflect in the company lounge. The chatter of coworkers filled the background, laughter ringing like music, and he closed his eyes for a moment. He thought back to the days of waiting, wondering if he had been too ambitious, too driven. Now the vigorous energy of the office fueled his confidence, and it was a stark reminder of how far he had come. A colleague called out, jolting him back to the present. "We're heading to grab coffee." The invitation felt like a warm embrace, a sign that he was finally part of this world. He nodded eagerly, joining them as they made their way outside. The sun shone bright, illuminating the bustling city, and David couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over him. Over coffee, they shared stories, work experiences, hopes, and dreams. Each connection built a sturdy bridge from his past doubts to his current reality. One coworker said their enthusiasm contagious. It's the freedom to innovate, to think outside the box. David could feel the affirmation in their words resonating within him. This was what he had desired, the chance to collaborate, to contribute, and to learn in an environment that nurtured creativity. In the weeks that followed, moments like these became the norm. The fear that had once gripped him faded into the background like a distant memory. Each project he tackled only stoked the fires of his ambition, pushing him further into a rhythm that felt natural, alive. Even tough days became manageable challenges to overcome as a team. As the months progressed, David took on more responsibilities. The initial impression he'd made on Mr. Langston had lingered, propelling him into circles that felt both intimidating and exhilarating. Perhaps most invigorating was the feedback he received from his peers and superiors. They valued his opinions, and it made all the difference in turning those skeptical thoughts into a strong foundation of self-assurance. Then came a day when Mr. Langston invited him into his office for a one-on-one meeting. David's heart raced, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension brewing within him. What did the chairman want to discuss? "David, you've been doing exceptional work," Mr. Langston began, his tone serious yet encouraging. "We're launching a new initiative that aligns perfectly with your vision." Stunned, David could hardly find the words. It was a culmination of everything he had envisioned since that first call. "Thank you, sir." "I won't let you down," he finally managed to reply, excitement surging through him. "Of course you won't," Mr. Langston replied with a knowing smile. "I believe in you." His words felt like a spotlight illuminating David's path, reaffirming that waiting had not been in vain. As the project unfolded, challenges arose. There were late nights filled with problem-solving and brainstorming, but these moments only fueled his passion further. The excitement of pushing boundaries, of reaching for something he had once thought unattainable, became the backbone of his experience. Through every late night and early morning, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. All that waiting, all that self-doubt had transformed his path. The quiet moments had forged a reality more stunning than he had imagined. Eventually, the day came to present the project to the entire company, high-stakes moment pulsing with adrenaline. David stood in front of the vibrant audience, the room buzzing with anticipation. He looked at Mr. Langston, sitting proudly in the front row, and all the cacophony of doubt that once thundered in his mind faded away. As he presented, confidence radiated from him like sunlight, illuminating the room and igniting the passion of others. Each response was met with enthusiasm. Every idea was received positively. They were not just words spilling from his lips, they were visions ready to be realized. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. David felt the rush of gratitude wash over him. The journey from waiting in silence to standing in this moment was worth every ounce of struggle. Mr. Langston stood up first, a proud smile across his face. "Today we witness innovation at its best," he declared. Ecstatic, David absorbed every cheer, every smile. The silence he had once feared transformed into echoes of his success, solidifying his place within this beautiful, evolving tapestry of dreams. That night, as David lay in bed, exhaustion washed over him, but alongside it lay a sense of serenity. He had transformed every doubt, every moment spent waiting, into motivation. The journey had been challenging, yes, but in that struggle, he had emerged victorious. He smiled, closing his eyes, whispering a silent affirmation of gratitude. He understood now what it meant to wait, not with anguish, but with hope. And as he drifted into the calm of sleep, he knew that each moment of silence was a stepping stone, a foundation for the crescendo of his success yet to come. Embracing the unknown had opened doors he had never expected, and with all his heart, he was ready to walk through them. The phone rang, and for a split second, Alex felt as if the ground beneath him had given way. He glanced at the screen, a number he didn't recognize, but something inside him urged him to answer. His heart thudded as he braced himself. This could be it, the call that could change everything. Just days before, he had sat in a well-appointed office, the imposing figure of the chairman looming over him like a thundercloud. Mr. Bartley's reputation preceded him, a titan in the industry of tech innovation, known for both his ruthless efficiency and keen eye for fresh talent. It had been an electrifying day, filled with nervous excitement as Alex shared his vision for the future of artificial intelligence. He had poured his heart into that pitch, weaving together every thought, every idea he had worked so hard to develop. "I like your ideas, Alex," Mr. Bartley had said, his voice rich and firm. The words had struck a chord deep within him. The challenge was daunting, but the prospect of success shimmered like a beacon in the distance. Now sitting in his cluttered apartment, surrounded by half-finished projects and coffee cups long gone cold, Alex waited for that haunting echo of uncertainty to fade away. He had replayed the moment over and over in his head, examining every interaction, every slight hesitation. The wait was torturous, a suspenseful pause in a movie where he felt like the forgotten character. As the ringtone faded, Alex hesitated for a heartbeat longer before answering. "Alex, it's James Bartley." The calm, authoritative voice instantly cut through his anxiety, igniting his hope. He nearly shouted, his heart racing. "Good, I just wanted to follow up on our previous discussion." Time slowed. Alex felt as though the air around him thickened, a wave of relief washing over him, hot and liberating. It was all happening. "Thank you so much, mister," he managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'd like to formally offer you a position here," the chairman continued, his tone firm but warm. "We'll go over the details when you come in next week." "Of course," Alex exclaimed, the weight of several months of anxiety lifting off his shoulders. The silence he had endured was shattered, fluttering away like dried leaves in the wind. As he hung up, laughter bubbled up from deep inside him, a giddy mix of disbelief and joy. He had done it. All those nights spent unsure of himself, wondering if his ideas were good enough, had finally led him here. This was the breakthrough he had worked tirelessly for, but it didn't end there. He had a reputation to build now, expectations to meet, and challenges ahead. Next few weeks at TechWave flew by in a whirlwind of energy, anxiety, and excitement. Alex dove into his new role with a fervor he hadn't yet experienced. The office pulsed with creativity, brilliant minds sparking off one another, ideas flying into the air like fireworks. Yet within that bustling environment, the pressure loomed heavily. Every day now felt as if he were teetering on the edge of a precipice, that moment of creative jubilation overshadowed by a doubt he thought had vanished. What if he was just a flash in the pan? Would he be able to hold his own among these seasoned experts? One afternoon, after meeting with his team, he found himself staring at the whiteboard filled with diagrams and ideas. Alex had presented a bold concept for an advanced AI algorithm, but the skepticism in the room had been tangible. "It's a lot to tackle in a short time," one colleague had cautioned. That doubt echoed in his mind as he sat alone at his desk, the hum of the office serving as background noise to the chaos within. The wait for acceptance turned into a new kind of silence, a silence that pressed in on him, making him question every decision. How could he prove himself when the people around him appeared so much more knowledgeable? He couldn't let this moment slip away. Alex knew he had to press on. He turned to his laptop, pouring all his thoughts, strategies, and innovations onto the screen. He researched triumphs and failures of past projects, immersed himself in literature on artificial intelligence, and sought out mentorship from more experienced colleagues. The more he learned, the more he felt that flicker of confidence reignite, small but undeniable. Despite all his efforts, doubt still lingered. Weeks passed, he found himself stuck in a cycle of overthinking. Every time his phone buzzed, he held his breath. If it was Mr. Bartley calling in disappointment, What if he was letting everyone down? Then the moment arrived that would change everything again. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of plotting and planning, Alex had just settled onto his couch when his phone rang. It was Mr. Bartley again. "Alex, we need to discuss your recent proposal." The chairman's voice resonated through the line, steady but serious. "Yes, of course, sir," Alex replied, though clenched anxiety filled his throat. "While I admire your initiative and drive, I think you need to consider the concerns raised in our last meeting." A cold wave washed over him, the reality of his position crashing against that joyful initial spark of hope. "I understand, I'll work to refine it," he said, fighting against a torrent of frustration. "Good, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Do not rush." As the call ended, he slumped back into the couch, feeling defeated. The darkness settled back in, echoing with doubt and uncertainty. He had been so close, and now it felt as if the rug had been pulled out from under him. That night, sleep evaded him. He lay awake, tumbling through endless thoughts, questioning everything from his value to his aspirations. But in the midst of that sleepless night, he remembered the fire within him. He drew strength from the recognition that waiting was not just an absence of noise. It could also be a musician's pause before the crescendo, a moment to gather one's energy before the spill of ultimate creativity. Instead of succumbing to despair, he embraced that moment of silence. How could he turn this doubt into a tool? So he sat down in front of his laptop, scrubbing away the chaos, and began to reconfigure his proposal. Instead of avoiding criticisms, he dissected them. He sought advice eagerly, defining every challenge his colleagues had raised, intertwining their concerns into his narrative. Days melted into nights, and Alex struggled through the grind. Focused and determined, he threw himself into his work, drafting, editing, and revising relentlessly. Each small step forward countered the lingering fears, solidifying his resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of reworking, he summoned the courage to present the updated proposal. His heart raced as he stood before his colleagues, the buzz of their past skepticism still colorful in the air. But hope had woven its way back into him, an unyielding thread he refused to sever. "I appreciate the feedback you all provided earlier," he began, confidence building with each word. "I've taken the time to refine our approach, addressing every concern directly." His eyes darted from face to face, seeking encouragement, hoping to witness their shift from disbelief to curiosity. He spoke, nods began to appear, small flickers of encouragement. He could feel himself feeding off their energy, his passion igniting their interest. When he concluded, silence hung for just a moment before the room erupted into an enthusiastic discussion. Ideas flew. Some of his colleagues contributed suggestions, building upon his original concept, crafting it into something vibrant and alive. He could hardly believe it. After weeks of sitting in the shadows, he was at the forefront, leading this charge. "Great job, Alex," Mr. Bartley said as they wrapped up, the warmth evident in his tone. "This aligns perfectly with our goals." The moment felt like a tidal wave crashing over him, liberating him from the confines of self-doubt. He had broken through the darkness, allowing the light to flood back in. From that day on, every successful project completed and every challenge faced built upon the last, gradually fortifying his confidence. He became a contributor, an innovator. The silence that had once threatened him became a powerful tool for reflection and growth. Weeks turned into months, and Alex climbed the ladder of success within TechWave, finally arriving at a place where his contributions were acknowledged and celebrated. The chairman himself often sought him out, complimenting him on breakthroughs and improvements, transforming his past fears into the invigorating motivation that fueled his creativity. Standing in an office filled with colleagues one day, Alex reflected on how far he had come. They were gathered to discuss an exciting future project, vibrant with enthusiasm and ideas. But more than that, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was no longer the uncertainty that haunted him. It had turned into an unshakable foundation. The weight he had once dreaded transformed into a fertile soil for growth. With every meeting filled with discussion and debate, Alex could now appreciate the waiting, the anticipation, the uncertainty as a fundamental part of the journey. Instead of looming dread, it became a path wrought with discoveries. And then one morning, while reflecting, something struck him. The chairman himself had waited. He had seen potential in him before anyone else had. Mr. Bartley had taken his time to assess, to judge, and to invest in the future of his company, and within that, in Alex himself. Realizing this connection, Alex harnessed it fully. He put forth his ideas with greater conviction, approaching every challenge with a collaborative mindset. Eventually, they touched upon groundbreaking advancements, pushing the boundaries of technology, and more importantly, they developed a profound culture of mentorship and growth throughout the company. The waiting, once filled with anxiety, had birthed a determination that would mark the path forward. Through perseverance, Alex had transformed his fears into fuel. Looking beyond just his success, Alex understood that everyone faced their own waiting moments, those quiet silences stacked against the roar of ambition. It was a dance of uncertainty and clarity, a reminder to embrace those moments fully. He would continue to evolve, to grow, to innovate, and inspire others just as Mr. Bartley had inspired him. As he stepped out of the office that day, he felt alive with possibilities, ready to seize every opportunity as it came. With the echoes of doubt behind him, he would wait no more. Instead, he would orchestrate each moment, turning silence into symphonies and each call into a new beginning. Because in the end, it wasn't just about receiving a call from the chairman. It was about recognizing the power that lay in both waiting and stepping forward. And for Alex, that was what it meant to truly seize the day. The ringing phone broke the stillness in the room, vibrating against the wooden table like a heartbeat. Jonathan's heart raced as he glanced at the screen. It was a number he didn't recognize, but his gut twisted with a mix of anxiety and hope. This could be it, the call that changed everything. Just 2 days earlier, Jonathan had walked through the revolving doors of Titan Solutions, his nerves dancing with every step. The sleek walls and polished floors felt like a world far removed from his small apartment and late-night coffee runs. He had waited months for this interview, and now that he was finally here, everything felt surreal. The chairman himself, Mr. Thompson, was in the room. Jonathan had prepared endlessly, poring over every detail of the company's projects. Yet the moment Mr. Thompson had entered the conference room, all that meticulous preparation felt distant. The chairman's presence commanded respect. His sharp suit and even sharper gaze scrutinized Jonathan as he spoke about his ideas. "Tell me why you think your vision for our software will make an impact," Mr. Thompson had asked, leaning back but clearly engaged. With each word, Jonathan had shared his passion, detailing how he believed they could revolutionize the customer experience. He felt the spark in the air as he spoke, a twinkle of understanding in the chairman's eye. "That's what we need, bold and innovative thinking," Mr. Thompson had said, and those words ignited fireworks inside Jonathan. But now, back in his empty apartment, reality gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the uncertainty that flooded his thoughts. Had he been confident enough? Had his ideas landed as he intended? The waiting felt agonizing. As the clock slowly ticked away, he fought against the temptation to reach out to check if anyone had heard anything. His friends had warned him against that "give it time," they had said, but every tick echoed louder in his mind, reminding him of the tender threads of hope he was trying to weave. Sitting alone, Jonathan considered the psychology of waiting. There was an art to it, he had read. Research claimed that waiting can amplify anxiety, but it could also foster resilience. Resilience sounded great in theory, but the silence was crushing. He tried to distract himself by scrolling through social media feeds, his heart sinking as he watched friends celebrating new jobs and promotions. He thought every like, every comment felt like a dagger, a reminder of his stillness. Just when he thought he could distract himself no longer, his phone vibrated again. It was his mother, and he quickly answered, grateful for the distraction. "Hey, sweetie," her voice poured warmth into his cold evening. "Just waiting on a call, Mom, you know how it is," he replied, attempting a light-hearted tone. He could hear her smile through the phone. "I know you're anxious, but remember, good things come to those who wait," she reassured him. How many times had he heard that phrase, "good things take time"? He knew it was true, but right now, all he felt was the weight of uncertainty pressing down on his chest. The evening stretched into darkness, and Jonathan found himself pacing the floor of his living room. The walls felt like they were closing in, the stillness suffocating. He thought back to moments of his upbringing, the days his parents encouraged him to chase his dreams and how they urged him to embrace uncertainty. "It's in those moments that you grow," they'd tell him, but how long should one wait? That night, sleep eluded him, every tick of the clock a reminder of the void left by anticipation. The phone remained lifeless on the table, and he finally surrendered, allowing himself to drift into uneasy dreams. The next day dawned, but Jonathan felt as if he was still wrapped in the shadows of sleeplessness. He fought through the haze and completed his morning routine, but the waiting loomed large. He kept his phone close, unable to pull himself away from it, willing it to ring. On the third day, doubts rumbled like thunder in his mind. What if they had chosen someone else? What if he had blown the interview? The negative spirals felt like venom, pulling him under just as his ambitions began to bloom. Instead of wallowing any longer, he made a decision. He needed to turn his energy into action, to confront the silence that was suffocating him. Maybe he couldn't control when the call would come, but he could control his preparation. Grabbing his laptop, he started to review his notes from the interview, seeking inspiration. As he reread his strategy ideas, he felt sparks of creativity igniting. What if he reached out to their hiring team? A follow-up email couldn't hurt. Taking a deep breath, he composed a message, a polite note expressing gratitude for the opportunity to interview and reiterating his enthusiasm for the role. With a firm click, he sent the email, yet his heart raced with a blend of dread and hope. What if they took it the wrong way? But in that moment, as he let the doubt go, an unexpected sense of relief washed over him. The silence that had felt so oppressive transformed into a canvas he could paint on. Each minute that passed didn't feel as heavy now. He tilted his head toward the sun shining through his window. There was life outside that phone, and he was ready to embrace it. After a few hours, still nothing. But he found himself more equipped to deal with the anxiety that had once swallowed him whole. He seized the moment and decided to attend a local networking event. It was time to connect with others, to mingle with possibilities. The room was buzzing with energy. Excited conversations filled the air as professionals mingled, sharing ideas and dreams. Jonathan nervously navigated the crowd, but soon something began to shift within him. The initial tension melted away as he engaged in conversations about tech trends and innovations. Each exchange fueled his confidence, and he realized how vibrant the world could be outside of his own anxieties. While speaking to a small group, Jonathan shared snippets of his ideas, his voice steady and passionate. Their reactions were encouraging. They lined in, curious and engaged. Perhaps it wasn't just about the job, but about creating connections that fueled inspiration. On his way home from the event, Jonathan felt a surge of optimism. The weight of waiting no longer felt burdensome. He realized he didn't have to cling to the anticipation of a call. Instead, he could embrace the journey he was on. He had transformed the tension into creativity, carving out a space to grow beyond the confines of that once suffocating silence. As dawn broke on the fourth day, he awoke to another familiar routine, feeling energized and renewed. He stepped out into the cool morning air, ready to tackle whatever awaited him. But before he even arrived at work, something unexpected occurred. The phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him to attention. Heart pounding, he fished it out, not hesitating to check. It was a text message from an unknown number. His breath caught. The chairman had reached out. He read on, the words igniting a whirlwind of emotions inside him. Mr. Bartley expressed how impressed the team was with Jonathan's ideas, and he wanted to set up a follow-up meeting to discuss his role further. Joy surged through him, eclipsing the shadows of doubt that had clouded his perspective for days. Without delay, he hurriedly replied, accepting the invitation with gratitude and zeal. The meeting arrived sooner than expected. Jonathan felt both excitement and nerves knotting in his stomach as he prepared to speak with Mr. Bartley once again. After the initial introduction, the chairman leaned back in his chair, not unlike their first meeting. But now the stakes felt entirely different. "Jonathan, your follow-up email was very professional," Mr. Bartley noted, his steely demeanor softened slightly. "Thank you, sir," Jonathan replied, the confidence surging in him. The dialogue that followed became an engaging discussion, each topic spiraling into new ideas and creative possibilities. Mr. Bartley seemed genuinely interested, a spark igniting between them. What had once felt like a solitary journey began to transform into a shared vision. Jonathan spoke openly about his methods, and the chairman responded positively, feeding off the energy imbuing the room. Suddenly, Jonathan felt like he was in control, and every bit of waiting had led him to this moment of clarity and connection. The silence had birthed a stronger version of himself, and he embraced it fully. After the meeting, now filled with renewed energy, Jonathan floated back to his desk, buoyed by the kindness and encouragement the chairman had shown. He was no longer just the anxious applicant. He had transformed into a valuable team member, poised for growth and innovation. Slowly, offered projects emerged in his path, each one a step forward. Jonathan found himself collaborating with skilled professionals, engaging in discussions that explored every inch of creativity. The momentum continued to build, and he realized how interconnected success could be. Each collaboration strengthened his resolve. Days turned into weeks, and as time progressed, each project became a stepping stone in his development. Whenever doubts crept in, which they often did, he channeled the anxiety into momentum. This was his journey, and he was the captain steering his ship through rough waters. Months later, he received another email from Mr. Bartley, adjusting their scheduled meeting to reflect their evolving projects. The chairman had requested Jonathan to lead an upcoming presentation that would showcase their innovations. Jonathan's heart raced again, but this time it was a rush of excitement, a celebration of how far he had come. He threw himself into preparation with vigor, collaborating with his team, refining every detail of the presentation until it felt polished to perfection. On the day of the showcase, the atmosphere in the room was electric. Jonathan stood in front of his colleagues, ready to present to not just them, but also to investors and potential partners. As he began, he felt empowered, the weight not just in anticipation, but now a launchpad for success. He spoke with conviction, passion pouring from him as he outlined their plans. The investors nodded in approval. Energy pulsed through the room as he touched on the impact their innovations could have on the future. When he concluded, applause erupted, not only from the audience, but from the core of his being. Jonathan felt alive. The challenges he faced, the silence he endured, had transformed into triumph. As he exited the stage, a weight lifted off him. He hadn't just waited for a call, he had navigated the journey of uncertainty. Every moment, every doubt became a building block towards something greater. In that triumph, Jonathan realized silence wasn't merely an absence of noise. It was a powerful canvas, an opportunity to paint dreams, to grow beyond confines, and to embrace the unknown. In the weeks that followed, he would continue to thrive and innovate, pushing the boundaries of what he could achieve. The journey had transformed him, and now, with every ringing phone and open door, he knew he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The silence had spoken, but now it rang with the symphony of promise and potential. Jonathan had learned to embrace both the waiting and the journey, a harmony that became his guiding light. The rain poured down in sheets, each drop hitting the pavement with a deafening thud. Inside his small, cluttered apartment, Ethan sat with his phone in hand, staring at it as if it could magically conjure the call he had been waiting for. 3 days had passed since his interview, and still no word from the chairman of Solara Tech, a company he had dreamed of joining ever since he was young. Anxiety twisted in his stomach like a knot, tighter and tighter, every tick of the clock amplifying the dread. He remembered the moment he stepped into the sleek glass building of Solara Tech, a place where innovation buzzed in the air like electricity. The sun had shone brightly that day, and the hopes in his heart matched its radiant glow. But now it felt like the clouds had rolled in fast, darkening his mood with every passing hour. The interview had been surreal. Sitting across from Mr. Jacobs, the chairman himself, Ethan had felt both excitement and fear coursing through him. The questions had come at him like rapid fire, each one probing deeper than the last. The weight of those questions could have crushed him, but he remembered taking a deep breath, channeling his passion for renewable energy. "I believe we can create solutions that will not just benefit our company but the planet," he had replied, and in that moment he had truly believed it. Mr. Jacobs had nodded thoughtfully, his piercing blue eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "You're a dreamer, Ethan. But dreamers must also be realists." The question hung in the air, and Ethan felt the enormous responsibility resting on his shoulders. "Absolutely," he replied, steadying himself. The exchange had felt empowering, igniting a fire within him. But now he sat alone, the clock ticking mercilessly as if mocking his impatience. Surely they weren't taking this long to decide. The doubt seeped in, wrapping around him like a heavy fog, making it hard to breathe. But was it? In this waiting game, every second felt like an eternity. Ethan sighed, placing the phone down and running a hand through his hair. As he looked out the rain-streaked window, he caught a glimpse of the world continuing to move around him, cars honking, people rushing by, their lives unaffected by his anxious wait. He felt small and insignificant, a single drop in a vast ocean. The memory of his childhood flooded back, the night he had told his family about his dreams of working in renewable energy. But sitting here now, doubting himself, the words felt distant, echoing hollowly. Just then the phone buzzed beside him and he jerked back to attention. His heart raced and he grabbed the phone, hopeful, but it was just a reminder, nothing important. Frustrated, he threw it down, the silence creeping back under his skin like ants. Maybe I should just call them, he thought, pacing back and forth, but deep down he knew calling would seem desperate. He had to wait. Breathing deeply, he sat back down, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Finally, the silence became too much. He reached for his laptop, hoping to distract himself. Maybe he could work on that project proposal he had dreamed up. With every hour spent, he poured himself into refining his ideas, turning anxiety into tangible plans. He prepared slides, crafted a vision, trying to insulate himself against the uncertainty that gnawed at him, but nothing felt safe. The more he worked, the more he felt that palpable absence, the phone, the connection, the response he so desperately wanted. Days slipped by in this whirlpool of waiting, and by the time the weekend rolled around, he couldn't shake the darkness lurking inside. Ethan decided to meet up with Aaron for a drink, hoping that a change of scenery might lift his spirits. As they sat in a bustling pub, Ethan found himself recounting the week's events, his worried thoughts spilling out. "I just don't get it, man," he said, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Ethan, look," Aaron leaned forward, his expression earnest. "You've done the work, you nailed the interview, sometimes it just takes time." He shot back, feeling his chest tighten with the weight of the possibility. "Just trust the process. You're in the running, you're meant for this," Aaron replied confidently. Back at home, Ethan lay awake, wrestling with his thoughts. Could he really trust the process? The silence gnawed at him, a relentless reminder of uncertainty. The following morning, the sun broke through the clouds, but Ethan remained cloaked in doubt. He walked to the cafe down the street, determined to reclaim some focus. The outside world was vibrant, people bustling about their lives, but inside him, a storm brewed. Over a cup of coffee, he pulled out his laptop and scrolled through articles about the latest innovations in renewable energy. As he read, a thought struck him. What if he reached out to someone already involved with Solara Tech? Maybe a friend of a friend could give him insight into what was happening. Gathering the necessary information felt like a small step toward taking back control. He spent the day crafting polite messages to various contacts, weaving hope into each word. If it was fate that would guide him, he would certainly embrace it. As evening fell, Ethan returned home with a new sense of purpose. He would not be paralyzed by the wait. Hours turned to days, and he kept busy connecting with people, pouring his energy into refining his skills and increasing his knowledge. But as time passed, the phone remained silent. Then on the 5th day of waiting, just as Ethan was about to grab a snack, the phone buzzed again. His heart leaped, the anticipation almost unbearable. He whispered to himself, holding his breath. He grabbed the phone, eyes wide, but this time the call was from an unknown number. Deciding to take his chances, he answered. A voice asked, firm yet friendly, "Ethan, this is Mia from Solara Tech." His breath caught in his throat, fingers tightening around the phone. "I'm good, thank you. I wanted to reach out regarding your application and interview with Mr. Jacobs." Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. Oh, what did he? He stammered, unable to contain his excitement. Mr. Jacobs would like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the details of your potential role within the company. He believes you have a lot to offer and he wants to get to know you better, Mia said, her voice warm and inviting. Ethan felt as if the ground beneath him was reborn. Yes, absolutely. Great, I'll send the details shortly. As the call ended, a wave of exhilaration crashed over him. The silence that had weighed down his heart had finally shattered, replaced by the vibrant possibility of what lay ahead. He laughed aloud, the sound ringing freely in his apartment. But then came the counterbalance. A wave of anxiety washed over him. What if he didn't impress Mr. Jacobs this time? What if this were just a trick of fate? He pulled in a breath, dismissing the negative thoughts, forcing himself to focus on the possibilities. That evening, with adrenaline still coursing through him, he prepared for the meeting, gathering information and mapping out his ideas. If this was his second chance, he wouldn't squander it. The morning arrived, bright and full of promise. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, repeating words of affirmation to himself. You can do this. When he arrived at Solara Tech, the energy in the building felt electric. This time, he navigated to Mr. Jacobs' office with a sense of purpose. As he stepped into the sleek space, he noticed the ambience changed. There was a deliberate intensity in the air. Good morning, Ethan, Mr. Jacobs greeted him, standing as he gestured for Ethan to take a seat. Thank you for having me, sir, Ethan replied, his voice steady but laced with anticipation. The conversation began to flow effortlessly. Mr. Jacobs posed questions about the industry, gauging Ethan's insights and ideas. Ethan found himself speaking with confidence, feeling at home while discussing innovations that could change the way energy was produced and consumed. This was his arena, his passion transforming into a tangible vision. Yet midway through the discussion, just as Nathan felt like he was gaining his footing, the tide shifted. Mr. Jacobs paused, his expression serious. Ethan, let me be frank, the energy sector is facing significant challenges. We're looking for someone who can think outside the box and take risks. Those words hung in the air like a weight. For a moment, Ethan felt his throat tighten. Could he truly measure up to the expectations that were now anchored to his name? Absolutely, he replied, a fire igniting in his chest once more. Mr. Jacobs' eyes flickered with intrigue, but then unexpectedly his phone buzzed and he glanced down. Excuse me for a moment, he said, pressing a button to answer. Ethan could feel the tension slithering back into the room. As Mr. Jacobs spoke, his expression shifted from intrigue to concern, a transformation that made Ethan uneasy. Understood, the chairman said, his voice taking on a different tone. And just like that, the meeting shifted to a chilling silence. Mr. Jacobs looked up at Ethan, his features pale, a storm brewing behind his blue eyes. Ethan's stomach dropped, confusion clouded his thoughts. What could he possibly mean? Just as the chairman prepared to explain further, the office door swung open, and a flurry of staff rushed in, panic painted on their faces. Each uncertain glance exchanged, only deepening the anxiety swirling between them. Mr. Jacobs, one of the staff cried, the project has been put on hold. Ethan blurted out, the words cracked through his panic, racing forward in desperation. But just then the alarm bells sounded nearby, piercing the air, a cacophony of disarray that echoed outside. Jonathan felt the weight of every moment come crashing down. What kind of storm was brewing outside the walls of this glistening office? Mr. Jacobs turned to Ethan, his face serious. We don't have much time. An unsettling rush of adrenaline filled the room. Everything he had prepared for felt like a carefully constructed dream torn apart at the seams. Where was this heading? What awaited them just beyond the door? As chaos erupted around him, Ethan's heart raced, uncertainty clawing at his chest. He felt like a ship tossed in turbulent waters, uncertain of the next wave. He looked to Mr. Jacobs, searching for guidance while battling a looming question. Would he stand firm in the face of this unexpected storm, or would he be swept away? And as the alarms continued blaring, Ethan realized this was just the beginning. Decisions had to be made, and perhaps, just perhaps, his journey was far from over.